Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we're diving into a breaking and intense development from Gaza that has shocked the world once again. A deadly ambush by Hamas has reportedly destroyed an Israeli military convoy, sparking chaos, flames, and new fears of a massive escalation across the region. What began as a tense standoff has now erupted into full-scale violence on the streets of Gaza, with dramatic battlefield footage circulating online showing the devastating aftermath of the attack. This event marks one of the most significant and unexpected confrontations since the last major conflict, and the consequences could be enormous for both sides. Reports emerging from local sources and international media indicate that the ambush took place in the northern sector of Gaza, where Israeli armored vehicles were conducting what was described as a routine patrol or supply operation. However, Hamas fighters appear to have been lying in wait, using the dense urban terrain to their advantage. Within moments, explosions tore through the convoy as anti-tank missiles and improvised explosive devices were detonated in a coordinated strike. The attack destroyed multiple vehicles and left several Israeli soldiers either dead or severely injured, according to preliminary reports that have not yet been officially confirmed by the Israeli military. Video footage from the scene shows plumes of black smoke rising into the sky as flames engulfed the wreckage. The sound of gunfire echoed through the narrow streets as Hamas fighters claimed responsibility for what they described as a strategic victory, and a message to Israel that Gaza remains defiant despite months of bombardment and blockade. On social media, Hamas released a statement saying that their units had successfully neutralized a large Israeli armored formation using advanced weaponry. Israeli officials, however, quickly vowed retaliation, promising that the attackers would face a severe and immediate response. The ambush represents a serious intelligence and tactical setback for Israel's forces, who have been conducting operations inside Gaza to dismantle militant infrastructure. Analysts are calling this one of the deadliest strikes on an Israeli unit in recent months, pointing to the high level of coordination and precision displayed by Hamas. The attack suggests that despite relentless Israeli airstrikes and ground incursions, Hamas remains capable of mounting sophisticated operations. This could dramatically shift the dynamics on the battlefield, especially as international pressure mounts for both sides to de-escalate. Eyewitnesses from nearby neighborhoods described scenes of panic and destruction. Civilians fled their homes as explosions rocked the area, and ambulances rushed to the scene under heavy fire. The Israeli military reportedly sealed off the surrounding area, launching air raids in retaliation within minutes. These airstrikes hit several suspected militant positions, but as usual, residential buildings and civilian structures were also damaged, leading to more casualties among the local population. The situation on the ground remains extremely tense, with ongoing clashes reported throughout the day. In Jerusalem and Tel Aviv, the Israeli government convened emergency meetings as officials scrambled to assess the full scope of the attack. Defense Minister Yoav Gallant issued a statement calling the ambush a cowardly act of terror, and vowed that Israel would hunt down every individual responsible. Meanwhile, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu addressed the nation, saying that Israel would respond with maximum force to protect its soldiers and citizens. The Israeli Defense Forces released aerial footage claiming to show airstrikes targeting the Hamas unit believed to have orchestrated the ambush. On the other hand, celebrations were seen in parts of Gaza as Hamas supporters hailed the attack as a major victory against what they describe as Israeli occupation. Crowds reportedly gathered in the streets, chanting slogans and waving flags, even as the sound of Israeli fighter jets roared overhead. The propaganda war is now in full swing, with both sides flooding media channels with their version of events. Hamas insists that the attack was a legitimate military operation targeting an occupying force, while Israel has labeled it a terrorist act that proves Hamas is intent on continuing the cycle of violence. This ambush comes at a time when the situation in Gaza was already extremely fragile. Weeks of bombardments have devastated infrastructure, leaving hospitals struggling to treat the wounded and power outages crippling essential services. The United Nations has warned of an impending humanitarian disaster if hostilities continue. Yet, neither side appears willing to back down. Israel views Hamas as an existential threat that must be dismantled, while Hamas sees itself as the defender of Palestinian resistance against occupation. The result is an unending cycle of bloodshed, where every attack fuels another round of retaliation. Military experts are analyzing how Hamas managed to pull off such a devastating ambush. Early indications suggest that the militants may have used advanced guided anti-tank missiles, possibly smuggled in through tunnels or supplied by regional allies. Some sources even speculate that drones were used to monitor Israeli troop movements before the attack, providing Hamas with critical intelligence. The precision of the operation indicates months of planning and coordination, raising serious questions about Israel's surveillance and intelligence capabilities within Gaza. For Israel, this incident could prompt a major shift in strategy. In recent months, the Israeli army has relied heavily on air power and limited ground incursions, aiming to weaken Hamas while avoiding high casualties among its soldiers. However, the loss of an entire convoy could force Israel to reconsider its tactics, possibly leading to a broader ground operation. That, however, carries huge risks, both in terms of military losses and international backlash. Global reactions are already pouring in, with several countries urging restraint while others warn that the conflict could spill over into neighboring regions. The United States has expressed deep concern over the renewed escalation, calling on both sides to avoid actions that could worsen the humanitarian crisis. The European Union has echoed that message, while nations in the Middle East are divided, some quietly backing Hamas's resistance narrative, others fearing that renewed war could destabilize the region further. Meanwhile, Iran has praised the ambush as a legitimate act of resistance, while Israel has accused Tehran of directly supplying weapons and intelligence to Hamas. This growing tension underscores how deeply intertwined regional politics have become in the Gaza conflict. As night fell over Gaza, the skies once again lit up with explosions as Israel launched what it called precision strikes in response to the ambush. The Israeli military claimed it targeted Hamas command centers, weapons storage sites, and tunnel networks. However, local reports say many of these airstrikes hit densely populated areas, causing multiple civilian casualties. The death toll continues to rise on both sides, deepening anger and despair among families already trapped in an endless cycle of violence. Hospitals in Gaza have issued urgent appeals for medical supplies, while rescue workers struggle to reach victims trapped under rubble. The psychological toll of this renewed warfare is immense. Families in Gaza are once again forced to flee their homes, seeking shelter in schools and UN facilities. Meanwhile, Israeli civilians in border towns live under constant rocket alerts, rushing to shelters as Hamas retaliates with missile barrages. The human suffering is staggering, and yet, political leaders on both sides remain entrenched in their positions, each blaming the other for the bloodshed. International organizations continue to call for an immediate ceasefire, but neither side appears willing to compromise. This latest incident also reignites debate over Israel's long-term strategy in Gaza. Critics within Israel argue that years of military operations have failed to bring lasting security, instead fueling greater resistance and international condemnation. Others believe that Israel has no choice but to maintain a hardline stance, arguing that Hamas's ideology leaves no room for peace. Within Gaza, residents are caught between the harsh reality of war and the hope that their suffering might one day lead to political change. But for now, the only certainty is more violence. As more footage from the ambush surfaces, analysts note the growing sophistication of Hamas's media operations. The group released high-quality video clips showing the moment of attack from multiple angles, likely using drone footage. The images show armored vehicles being struck with pinpoint accuracy, followed by secondary explosions as ammunition ignited. These videos are being used as both propaganda and psychological warfare, aimed at boosting morale among supporters and spreading fear among Israeli troops. Israel, meanwhile, has launched its own media counteroffensive, emphasizing its determination to restore deterrence. The humanitarian implications of this renewed escalation are catastrophic. Water and electricity supplies in Gaza are dwindling, while fuel shortages threaten to shut down hospitals and aid distribution. The United Nations warns that the enclave is on the brink of total collapse. Yet amid the suffering, both Hamas and Israel continue to prepare for further confrontation. Israeli reservists have reportedly been called up, and there are signs of troop movements toward the border. For civilians on both sides, fear and uncertainty dominate everyday life. In the broader regional context, this ambush could have ripple effects far beyond Gaza. Hezbollah in Lebanon has already issued statements praising the attack, raising concerns that the northern front could also ignite. Israel's security establishment is reportedly on high alert, watching for any signs of coordinated action from Iranian-backed groups in Syria, Iraq, or Yemen. The Middle East stands on edge, with every new explosion threatening to ignite a larger regional conflict. Despite the escalating violence, diplomatic efforts continue behind the scenes. Egypt and Qatar are reportedly trying to mediate a temporary ceasefire to allow humanitarian aid into Gaza. However, with emotions running high and both sides demanding concessions, a breakthrough seems unlikely. The Israeli government insists that any truce must include the disarmament of Hamas, while Hamas demands an end to the blockade and guarantees of Palestinian rights. The gap between these positions remains vast. As this crisis unfolds, one thing is clear: Gaza once again finds itself at the epicenter of a deadly confrontation that shows no sign of ending. The ambush that destroyed the Israeli convoy has set off a chain reaction of violence that could reshape the region's political and military landscape. Both sides claim victory, but the true cost will be paid by the civilians trapped in the middle. The world watches, horrified and helpless, as Gaza burns and the cycle of vengeance continues. The days ahead will be critical. If Israel escalates further, we could see another full-scale invasion, with devastating consequences. If diplomacy fails, the suffering will deepen and the region could spiral into wider chaos. The ambush may have been a single event, but its impact will echo for months, perhaps years, to come. For now, Gaza is once again in flames, and peace feels further away than ever. That's the situation as it stands, tense, dangerous, and deeply tragic. The world holds its breath, hoping that somewhere amid the smoke and fire, a path toward peace might still emerge. But tonight, the reality is grim: Gaza is burning, and the future remains uncertain.